Following on from what could only be described as an epic opener to the first season of the show, where we were introduced to the world pre the infection when discoveries were just being made, the world when the outbreak took place in 2003, and then in the present day as Joel, Ellie and Tess left the Fedra-run space to deliver Ellie. The Weeks Ahead trailer has been released and it's filled us in on what we could expect to see in episode 2 and beyond. So with that, I thought I'd break down and explain the trailer along with giving my theories and predictions to what I think could happen next. So let's get into it. Here is The Last of Us episode 2 trailer explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The trailer that was released opened up with what could only be described as eerie music playing, with the sound of a clicker intertwined with the music, adding to the haunting nature of the dark room that they were all standing in. It showed that the threat was high and that the situation that they were in at that moment could prove to be fatal. Over the top of the music, we had the line, "You ever kill one?" being spoken by Ellie, which was responded with a yeah from Joel. In this instance, we had Joel, Ellie and Tess all looking as though they were exploring an abandoned building, which was covered in darkness, but in the background there appeared to be somebody that was infected lurking around. Judging by the reactive response that it gave, it seems as though he may have noticed Joel. After this, we then had Ellie asking, "Is it hard?" when referring to killing somebody that was infected, knowing that they were once a human being. This was intertwined with a shot of what looked like could be somebody that was infected, which would be at the stalker stage, which means they could have been infected for a couple of weeks to several months. This is the stage of infection where they have the fungal infection coming out of their head, but other than that, the human form is still in place. Not like the stages later on down the line where they're unrecognizable. So the resemblance was still clear in that moment. We saw this in the trailer when Ellie held her infamous knife up to the stalker and the glow of the yellow eye shone through. After this, we then cut to Joel stating, "I'm taking you with me. We can just keep our histories to ourselves." This shows us that Joel most likely doesn't want to talk about the loss of his daughter Sarah or the falling out that he had with his brother Tommy. Judging by the fact that most of the trailer from the early stages onwards doesn't really include Tess, it makes me think that she's most likely not going to survive that long in the show, and could be one of the first main casualties in the present day. I imagine Joel most likely also doesn't want to hear how Ellie ended up on her own, and what her time was like in the orphanage. Ellie looked in shock as she was looking at the cityscape that was in front of her. In the first episode, we heard that she'd never really been beyond the wall, and was fascinated when they made it out of the zone. So I think she's most likely going to be eager to see the world from a different perspective, knowing and finding out what was once in the land that's considered off limits. In this instance, we then saw a shot of Riley, who's a character that's from Boston and is a survivor who I feel we will see adopt a very important role in this first season of the show. We then also heard Joel say to Ellie, "You don't tell anybody about your condition," which is him referring to the fact that Ellie appears to be immune to being infected. Something that we saw in the flashback from the 60s wasn't possible. If she tells people, then who knows what they could do. At least with Joel leading the way, he'll keep her safe. This was intertwined with Ellie rubbing her arm and screaming. I feel this could be a flashback to the 3 weeks prior to what we saw in episode 1, where we found out that she was supposed to be infected. After this, we then had a shot of the three of them walking through the city where it just looked abandoned, derelict, and like it contained no life at all. Following on from this scene, we then had a line from Tess where she stated, "We're trying to keep you alive," as she was directing it towards Ellie, as it then cut back to what looked like the scene from the start of the trailer where they were roaming around the building, but this time they stumbled across somebody that was late on in the infection stage. It seems as though, due to the fact that Ellie knows that she's immune to being infected once bitten, she may think that she can go at it alone, as Tess went on to say, "You're not immune from being ripped apart," showing that she does still require protection, even if Ellie doesn't think she needs it, as the threat is still there. As this line was spoken, we then got a horrific shot of what could only be described as a clicker. A clicker is an individual that's been infected for several years and their face has lost all of what is the human form, other than the lower half of it where their mouth is. We did actually see one in the first episode of the show, but it was splattered on the wall. It then looked as though it cut to the different parts of civilization that were still managing to thrive amongst the survival state. We had one that contained Bill and Frank. We'll most likely see Frank go on to build a relationship with Joel and Ellie in the show, which is something that it seems is most likely going to cause a lot of skepticism with Bill, Frank's partner, as we heard him saying, "We'll never have friends, as there are no friends to be had." This line was then intertwined with characters such as Kathleen and Frank looking as though they were in some kind of danger. We then also stumbled across another area which had gone back to the Western era. After this, we had an encounter between Joe and Tommy, something that it seemed as though Joel was originally worried about prior to leaving as he hadn't heard from him. Tommy said, just because life stopped for you doesn't mean it had to stop for me. In this instance, he's most likely referring to the day that Joe's daughter was killed, and also the newfound world that they found themselves in. Intertwined with this, we had a shot of Joel looking down at the watch that was now broken but was repaired by his daughter Sarah on his birthday in 2003, on the day that she died, so it clearly holds a great importance to him even now 20 years later. This was then met with a lingering shot of what looked like a bloater, the stage of infection after a clicker, coming out from under the ground along with many others, showing that the threat and danger was ever present. I imagine this could be intertwined with the shot that we saw from Frank. From here, we then had a fast succession of shots that were quite literally blink and you'll miss it. We had Joel wielding an axe, looking as though he was most likely going to be killing somebody that was infected. We had an explosion that took place in the snowy region, a shot from the scene where we were introduced to the clicker, but it now looked as though it was going to be catching up with Ellie and Tess as they were struggling alongside it on the ground. We had a shot of Sam and Henry, who are two brothers that people will be familiar with from the game, who are from Hartford. And then we had the final shot of the trailer. The line, "There's no halfway with this, we finished what we started," as we had Joel walking through the corridor looking as though he was going to be taking somebody out, and it then cut to black. This was most likely alluding to the fact that halfway through the show they're most likely going to encounter something that may make them feel as though they're not going to make it to the finish line and complete the mission that they set out to do. But Ellie is reminding Joe that she wants to complete what they started, as realistically, she's the last hope for the survival of humanity in this world that's just full of death, devastation, and infection. This trailer was a good insight to all that there is to come throughout this season. The first episode did such a good job at creating this world in a new medium, showing us the characters, 3 different time periods, and showing just how dangerous yet controlled the world was. I feel as we look set to enter different regions of this infected civilization, we'll see the stakes get higher, deaths occur that we don't expect, and tension that's been mastered like no other. I look forward to seeing all that's to come, and more specifically next week's episode. With it being 55 minutes following on from 80 this week, it's going to be a shame, but a runtime that will most likely be suited to what we're going to be viewing. I'm sure it's going to be a good one. So, there you have it, The Last of Us Episode 2 trailer explained. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @BrainPilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What do you think is going to happen next? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.